You know, the good old saying, come for the code, stay for the community. Is that it? Get into the Discord, get on the GitHub project, try and ask for help, and just get your head around things.
I'm sure I've heard that as a stat. It must be.
You do know if you leave that, if you put that out in the world, people will correct you on that. I don't know. Like, what do you say? when you say biggest. Today we're going to look at a article that's on the DrupalEyes.me blog post, and it is titled "How to Become a Drupal Developer." So the focus of this episode is going to be about if we had to start again, or if we had to learn some new type of technology, how would we best learn it? Of course, we're going to focus probably a bit too much on Drupal, but I do want to mention and talk about my experiences picking up new tech, because I'm learning new things. You always have to learn new things. I feel like every few years something new comes out and you have to chuck out the old stuff.
Every few weeks.
Every few weeks. Exactly. I remember the good old days where I was saying, you know, every week a new JavaScript framework was coming out, and, you know, it'll just be a noun like, I don't know, whiskey or handlebars, or just some other random name. So if you want to follow along, the link to the article should be below in the show notes. The title is called How to Become a Drupal Developer. So we might as well just get into the first part, and that is connect with a supportive community. Now, I like this one, and we've talked about this probably a bit too much about, you know, Drupal and its community. You know, the good old saying, come for the code, stay for the community. Is that it?
Yep, that's right.
I got it right. I sometimes mix those up. Yep. But that's true. Especially if you're learning a new open source project, and this has got really nothing to do with just Drupal itself, but any type of project, get into the Discord, because that's where most of the chat's happening these days. Get on the GitHub project. Again, that's where a lot of the discussions about the issues, and I also believe GitHub also has discussion sections as well. So get in there and just get your head around things. Try and ask for help if you can. Sometimes it can be a little unnerving, especially getting into Discord and seeing those channels just zoom past with content.
That's right. I'm not a huge fan of Discord. Funny enough, we were sitting here talking about learning a new tech. Yeah. You know, like I've back in the day using IRC.
I hated IRC, man.
Rocket Chat and Slack, which I found there, it's nice. It's in your browser and thing. And then one day, without myself realizing, suddenly Discord exists. I don't remember opening up Discord and just going, whoa, I'm still slow to take up Discord, and I'm not sure I particularly fancy its model.
The way
but that's just when we're talking about learning new tech, even like something like Discord comes along and you go, there's yet another new tech I've got to learn when I've already, you know, just doesn't.
It's just another chat system. And I have been thinking of perhaps setting one for WebWash, because you can actually stream stuff. I think you can stream audio to it. So we could even set one up for this. And then while we are recording,
you know what? I have my biases.
We can have feedback.
Type person, but you know, I agree with you. We probably Discord's the go.
But the gist of this point is that find the community where it's at,
get in the community,
and get in there. Because you will notice, even if you're a lurker like me, I'm one of those people that hide behind the bushes. You know that Simpsons meme of like Homer coming out of the bushes and going back in.
Oh, okay.
That's pretty much me in every community. I'm trying to force myself this year to be. This is, you know, 2024 is a social year of Ivan. I need to get out there.
Ivan.
Even if you just go in there and lurk around, get a good understanding of the community. They often have kind of like a channel just for announcements, so you can see when new versions are coming out. But that's also good for GitHub. Start the repo, and also I think you can put a notification in to get release updates. So whenever a release comes out, you're on top of it and you can kind of see what is happening.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think to this point, it is a good phrase to say get into the community, because you and I are both Drupalers.
Yeah.
And that's when we say things like Discord and GitHub. In Drupal, it is more along the lines of Slack and GitLab.
It is, yes.
And it's Drupal's GitLab. And so it is actually, I mean, funny enough, it leads right onto the next point, which is create a Drupal.org account where it says it's more than just software, it's a community, which I assume links to the Drupal's community page, which tells you all that stuff, right? So you're bang right in there.
Yes.
That's linked from the homepage at Drupal. So Drupal in particular, because it's such a big project, that's really easy to find. You go to their homepage, click community,
Yep.
voila, right? Other communities, you need to get to know them and where their communities are. And they can tend to be fragmented too.
Absolutely. And I do think Drupal's community setup is just a relic. I don't want to be condescending about that, but it's just the old way of doing things. And when I say relic, I don't mean that in a bad way. It's just that, yes, it is a strength, absolutely. But nowadays, everything is on GitHub. Now, that's a whole other conversation itself. Like, should GitHub be kind of like the de facto standard when it comes to code hosting? It isn't, but it has the network effect. That's the important part. Like, it's got the huge network effect. So if you do want to make it, air quotes, make it, you need to be on GitHub. Like, yes, you can be on GitLab and all the other ones, but yeah.
If I'm talking to a new person, this is one of those do as I say, not as I do kind of thing. Don't do what I do. Like, because I'm a relic too, right? I've brought up in, like I said, I was with IRC. I brought up in open source. I'm very much advocating for open source. I don't like to use proprietary systems. I'm resistant to using Discord. I'm resistant to using GitHub. But my advice is get in the Discord and get in the GitHub. Right?
Exactly.
I feel dirty saying it, but it is, it is the easiest path, especially if you're new. You don't want to be dealing with fighting against the flow like that.
Absolutely. When it comes to actually contributing, I think having a standard way of contributing is important, because I don't know about you, but I don't think, and now this is probably a terrible thing to say, but I don't think I have contributed a merge request in the new GitLab way. It's always like when I was writing code, because I kind of made the decision that, yes, my form of contributing to the Drupal community is with content. That's where my strength is. Not because I can't code. Well, I can't code. There we go. I use now CodePilot and ChatGPT to do it all for me.
I knew there was a reason we got along.
Exactly. But I remember creating patches. Like, that's the way I did it. Yes, you pull down Git. Well,
you can code.
Yeah, yes, I remember Drupal when you needed a CVS account. Is it CVS account?
Oh wow, yeah. I forget that you're a little bit before me.
I remember that we had to be approved.
CVS being what we had before Git.
Exactly. And then there was a big push.
What was it?
Git.
SVN?
Well, SVN Subversion. Yeah, but that one, but Subversion was terrible. It was a bit better, but when I jumped into Git, it was the speed. The speed for me was amazing because you couldn't pull down changes locally. Anyway, that's where you create. But then when you moved to Git, then you still created a patch. You created a diff. You then pushed up that patch up. And now I see it's still 50-50. But one thing I do like about GitHub having the standard is that I have contributed to the Symfony documentation, because I saw that the documentation was out of date, and I made a change, cloned it, created a PR, and they accepted it. And I was like, awesome.
Yeah, wow. See, I bring this up again. I'm so Drupal centric that, I mean, it is at the moment, the merge requests in GitLab are standard as of now, right? There's even on the contributors template, a template for when you upload a patch. You can go on. Remember we spoke about it, the community guidelines the other day, and I said I found those templates. One of those is how to respond when someone uploads a patch, to tell them to go use GitLab instead.
Go use GitLab instead. So, how do I do that?
I think the tests are turned off. Like that, if you upload a patch, it won't trigger the tests.
Yeah, I saw that in Twitter today. Was it? I think somewhere saying that the Drupal CI is now being deprecated, or on LinkedIn, one of them. Yeah, that's a big.
I can't remember the exact details, but it's kind of
it's massive.
GitLab's the default standard now,
which is the right thing to do. Yeah,
has been a few years. I still haven't got my head around. Even when I read an issue and you got the merge request and we click on to get a merge, I still haven't got my head around that fully. I managed to get by, but I think this speaks to a little bit though. This is why you got to get involved in the community.
Exactly.
you know, then you can go and ask the questions. You know, it's like, I need this. What do I do? You know, like I've because it's easy to download Drupal, put it on your, or any project, download, open the code, make some changes to the code, make a change locally. The process of then getting those changes up into the community. What's the process? Well, what are the protocols? How do they expect you to do that? I think parts of any community, you got to learn how that community functions.
Yep.
And though on that, when I say that advice, I say it's better to do it wrong than not do it at all.
Yes.
So if you don't know and you haven't found out where to go and get it up, someone will tell you.
Or I would say, even if you don't know and you ask and no one tells you, just do it, and then people tell you when you're wrong.
Yeah. I mean, that's the world, isn't it?
That's honestly the best way to get free support. That's what I've learned. If you ask for help and no one gives you help, do a video about it, and then you'll be told if you're wrong or not. It's the best way to get free support. All right.
Yep.
I think we should just move on to the next one. So the next one is find a mentor. Now, this one is actually, this is a good one. And this is something that I perhaps need as well, especially when it comes to like.
Me too. That's funny. We did pre-discuss this slightly this morning, but yeah.
Of course, these episodes are fully planned out. You know, scripted. We're scripted. I'm actually reading this off a auto cue. Yes, I'm reading this off. But yeah, I mean, just having the ability to ask somebody, being your rubber ducky. I know that doesn't sound nice, but I hope everyone who's listening to this knows what I mean by rubber ducky. It's just a concept of just asking your question out. Sometimes just vocalizing your problem, you can kind of answer it yourself. And that's why when you talk to a teammate and you just explain the problem, you often figure it out while you're explaining it. And I think that's a huge part.
Rubber ducking being the idea of you put a rubber duck on your desk and you explain the problem to the rubber duck, and then in the process of explaining the problem, you're like, I know what it is.
It doesn't have to be a rubber duck, or just talk to yourself like I do half the time.
Yeah. I personally find it better to talk to a real person.
Absolutely. I know.
I was speaking to somebody, I mentioned this in Slack the other day. They used the term rubber ducking when they asked a question. And it's like, I'm just rubber ducking. And I made the comment that it works better when you speak to a real person because you're more scared of making a mistake. So you're even more, like, you talk to a rubber duck, but when you talk to a person, you get that if I get it wrong, I tend to, especially in text, I'll edit it far more and then go, oh. And because it's a real person, you've got that extra psychological load on. But yeah, people like the rubber duck because they don't want to be disturbed. Hang on, talk to your rubber duck instead. But getting so on that point of having a mentor around though, is then you've got that help who can actually point you in the right direction. And now that's what we mentioned today. Neither you or I have had a Drupal mentor, so to speak. I mean, in my work, I had people who were more experienced than me on my team who I could go and ask questions to. But as far as a community member who's a Drupal person who can tell me this is how core works, this is how you contribute to it, that I've never particularly had. I've just been around a long time and been around long enough to get the idea of it. But this is such a good piece of advice that neither you or I have followed.
Yeah.
And probably would have been better off had we done so.
Well, you don't have to, when he says here, find a mentor, I don't think that is like contacting somebody and saying, please be my mentor. I know just by going to meetups, and this could be any meetup, you will straight away find the people that are more experienced in the technology. And I think it's important when you go to these things, talk about the problems that you're having with the technology. And often they will be like, well, why don't you just do this, this, and this? And it's like, oh, I didn't know I could do that. Oh yeah, there's a module that can do this, this, and this. And you're like, okay, cool, thanks. And for me, that's where I see a mentor can be helpful. I do sometimes wish, like, I would love to have a mentor in regards to, you know, trying to create a business online or something, having somebody to ask questions. Absolutely. But I think it can be great just to ask other people. And that can be finding a group in a Discord, in a Slack, and just asking your questions and finding that one person that's always going to reply. Because as you're fully aware, there's always the same group of people that always answer questions. And that's a good thing.
Yeah, and you find it's a fairly small group too. even though Drupal's got how many contributors who actually are listed on the thing, but when you go and ask for help, it's a funny thing. You soon find that you start to recognize the people's tags,
Yeah.
you know, their nicks and their nicknames. And then if you happen to go across to a meetup, you'll be talking to somebody, and halfway through the night, you hear their nick, and you go, "Oh, I know you." So yeah, as big as the community is, the community is also quite insular in the sense of you will get to know people. So it's very valuable. It becomes quite personal in that sense.
Absolutely.
You know, like a family, like it really is.
Oh yeah.
It's very much like a family. Brothers and sisters.
Yes, yes.
Kept looking out for each other and arguing.
Yes, yes, yes. Talking about how terrible Paragraphs is and how it's the most terrible module. It's like, oh, having this conversation again, are we?
So fundamental. So there is the point. I mean, I know in the Drupal community there is a pretty mentoring program. Like I think you can even put on your profile that I am a mentor.
Yes.
And you can connect with specific mentors. But as you said, there's also, and that's even when you stick this find Drupal is near you, it says it doesn't take you to a find a mentor page. It takes you to the page of here's the different, you know, that when it points you to groups.drupal.org, the drupal.chat.me, it points you to the Slack, global training days, the Drupal Association member directory, you know, which is another expansion on getting involved with the community.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's the same things like I'm in the Linux world, you know, you pop up on the Ubuntu forums. Now I've got a Manjaro box, pop up on the Manjaro, and I'm not involved in the community at the same level. Like it's when someone responds, I don't know who they are, to the extent that I've been around Drupal long enough that when someone replies, it's like, I've seen this same person reply 100 times. I know who they are in that sense.
Yeah.
But, you know, participating in forums, I know from this perspective, there are groups on Facebook where I see people asking questions, and it's kind of, you know, they're asking Drupal questions, and you're just like, the Drupal community doesn't exist on Facebook.
Yeah.
You know, and it's interesting that it's kind of like hop on, you know, if you're going to use a tool like Drupal, go read Drupal's community page, and it'll lead you where you need to be. It's really that simple. Yeah. You know, so this is why this blog's really good. It points you straight there, but it does say it because it's aimed at learning Drupal, and it says create a Drupal.org account. But I advise you any piece of software, especially in open source world, but so much of our tech, things like this anyway, go check out their website and read it first.
Yeah.
Don't, you know, don't just guess. Like that's asking a question on Facebook. There's people there that can help, but they're not the best people to ask. I imagine. I mean, I happen to be on there, but I'm not the best person to ask all the time either. Because I know there are people that know more than I do, and I know where they are.
Yes.
So I mean, almost it's like, you know, I don't want to hijack someone's group on Facebook either and go, you're in the wrong group, go ask somewhere else. And I can't, like, it's almost a faux pas to tell somebody that you're in the, you know, Drupal developers group on Facebook and someone asks a tech question. That seems to me a little bit of a faux pas to tell you, hey, you should go join the Slack channel.
Yeah.
Because then you're just recruiting out of their thing. But if you're on Facebook, go and join Slack. That's where that's where they are. And like you said, for Discord, like, so it's a matter of go and read the website because it'll point you much more likely into the right direction of where the actual people really are.
Yeah.
So
absolutely. All right. So the next point in this is map out your learning goals. And that's one thing, when I actually read this post, this kind of resonated with me a lot because that's one thing I've kind of struggled with when it comes to learning new tech. I read about it. First you go through the phase of discovering it. Everyone's talking about this new technology, this new framework. Okay, cool. Let's go. Let's read up about it. I watch a video on YouTube about it.
Tailwind CSS.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Or what is it? They're like such and such framework in 100 seconds. What is it? Firestone. Is it Firestone channel? Is that what it's called? No, Fireship. Oh, I forgot what it's called. Anyway, I think it's Fireship channel on YouTube where the guy does 100 seconds on a piece of technology.
Wow. I gotta look that up.
Oh, you don't know about that?
Nope.
Oh, okay. I'll get the correct Fireship.io. That's it. Yeah, the guy came out of nowhere and has like nearly just under 2 million subscribers. Crazy. And he often does, such and such technology in under 100 seconds. So I always check out his channel first. Then I check out the documentation, and often there is a Hello World documentation, a Hello World tutorial about it. Then you read it, then you have a play with it, you install a few things, you run a few, yarn install, npm install, you have a play, you follow the first 2 pages, and then you forget about it, like me. And that's what happens all the time. And then it's kind of like, oh, I do remember playing around with this tech, and that's it. And I do think sometimes that it would be good if I can actually use this technology. Like, yes, read the documentation, set it up, but actually have some type of goal. And that's the important thing. Have a goal. Set it up and deploy it somewhere, or build something basic.
It's always such a Drupal journey. But when I learned that was, at first, had a little bit of freelancing gig. Someone goes, you want to do some Drupal work, right? It's all right. I got to learn Drupal. And I followed some of this automatically. I just went straight to the Drupal.org things, like read a bit, got into the code, and I was making mistakes doing it wrong. Then decided, hey, look, this Drupal thing's pretty cool. I want a job in it, and went and applied for a job. And then they sent me a task that said, we want you to build a module that puts a block on this page that says such and such, and it's positioned in this spot. So I've got to do a module. So you go to Drupal and you read the how to build a module documentations. I followed it step by step. Now I was coming in with some pre-experience of, I knew to run coding standards and stuff like that. I could code already, right? I was a PHP guy, but then the path unfolded. So I had a goal, right? In that scenario, the goal was offered to me on a platter. So, I mean, my first piece of advice, because it's exactly what I did, is go and get a job. Like, even if you're not, I was so very little experienced. I'd had like 3 weeks experience with Drupal, maybe, right? Doing it wrong. And then when I applied for a job, they go, here, fill this exercise in, which told me what then it was just, all right, you want a module that does this. I had 4 days to figure it out. I went and followed the tutorial, adapted it up. And then, in fact, even that early day, they go, that was one of the best submissions we got. And it's like, wow. So like, my advice is just go get the job, because it's going to put you into that exact position where you can go, I've got my learning, I have a goal, I have something to map out. The counter to that, though, is your job's then, to a large extent, going to dictate that map.
Yes.
If you've got the time to play and you've got a project that you want to build. I mean, I'm not very good at that. I'm not very good at just going, I'm going to spin up a site and I'm going to make Twitter. Like, it's kind of, I need an actual problem, a real problem to solve, to motivate myself. So that's why I advise go get a job, because then they'll give you real problems, actual problems.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So. And if you can learn on the job, especially if you're friends with people, A, you're paid. Second, if you have a team that specializes in that technology, that is the best way to learn, because if you have a problem, they will tell you and teach you and kind of guide you. Because that's how I learned a lot of React back in 2016, like the long time ago, because I all of a sudden joined a team that was mostly front end. And they were like, oh, we don't have any Drupal work, but do you want some React work? Yeah, why not? And they reviewed my PRs and they mentioned this, they mentioned, that, oh, you need to change this, you need to change that. And that was a great way to learn. But then I did that for a couple months, and then React changed about 5 times since then. It keeps changing. But the concept is still pretty much the same. And so that's how I learned.
I think the Next.js thing.
Oh, Next.js. Well, exactly. Yeah. And right now, even though I am still a Drupal person, we use Next.js on the front end. So occasionally I do go in there and I dabble and break things and play around with Next.js. And if I have a problem, I just ask the front end, like a front ender, and say, is this okay? Is this how it's meant to be done? But then it's like,
yeah, having a good team, and this is similar to community, having people around.
Totally. That can honestly make or break your career. It can really set the path for your career. Yeah. But if you are learning on your own, I think it's important just to figure out what your goals are and then just try and be as specific. Or what is it? SMART. Is that the acronym? Sorry, I know you don't like acronyms, but what is
I don't like that one either in particular.
What is it? Specific,
measurable, actionable, timely.
No, there's an R in there. Smart. Yeah.
Realistic.
Realistic. See, you know all of this, man. You should. Yeah. Well, there you go. Yeah.
I know because I don't like it. That's smart, guys.
But
anyway,
but yeah, one of the recent examples I can give you is I was catching the train down to Sydney, and for people who don't know, I live outside of Sydney, about 2.5 hours outside of Sydney. So I was catching a train down to Sydney, and there's no internet on the train, and so I always like to set things up locally on my machine because I've got a bit of time where I can actually concentrate and not be bombarded by notifications. And what I was doing is I was setting up a Tailwind site in Drupal and just integrating that myself. And I was like, okay, by the time I get into Sydney, I want to set up a, have the site themed with the menu. I fixed up the layout as well. I did a whole bunch of other things. Yep. And then in between spotty internet, I would quickly just Google things. It's like, why doesn't this work? Oh, yeah, this doesn't work because of this way. So for me, that was like a proper goal. I had a goal. I wanted to set this thing up. I went in there and I built a pretty decent site. It's not the best site, but hey, I learned something.
Yeah, well, that's the idea. Maybe keep it simple too.
Yeah, absolutely.
I started learning React a bit in the past 12 months because I ended up going down a rabbit hole of learning all about Australia's open banking platform because I wanted to pull my bank balance out of my bank. And I learned a lot, and I got a blog post about the open banking system up. But it's the same thing. That's in that case, that was on my own time. I was happy to spend that time doing that. But if you're focused and you're definitely wanting to learn something specific, then that the SMART goal probably makes sense. Make it specific.
Exactly.
I mean, I'm a big believer in visions though. And then of course, I love agile and adapting to change and stuff. And that's sort of why I'm a bit resistant to the SMART goals. It's all right to have them specific, measurable, actionable and time. Yeah. But it's like kind of things change. I got my vision. I like to be able to adapt on the fly. As soon as you got those goals, you feel locked on them and they lock you in to an extent. Even if you don't lock them in stone, you got a psychological compelled to finish them when sometimes you should let them go. Love that cult of done we talked about last week for those reasons, right?
Yes.
Just get done. Just move from one spot to another, to the next. I think if you've got your focus, right? If you know what you want to do and you know what you want to achieve, then you just keep focusing on that and take the most obvious next step. That's the way I see that works. And that's where map your learning goals kind of makes sense.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Let's now move on to a few specific things. Now, here in the blog post, he talks about fundamental concepts in web development, HTTP, understanding HTML and the DOM. I think that's important. CSS fundamentals. Yeah, I think that's important, especially if you're like me that has, I was using CSS back in the table design days. So things keep changing. And it's like, oh, you can do this with Flexbox.
Tables.
And, I remember when tableless designs were a thing and you just float everything.
Well, here's a point too. Let's talk CSS. I mean, I've got CSS on my resume. I've worked on a million themes. I've worked with CSS. I've done Sass, which is compiled.
Yeah.
CSS. So for anyone listening, CSS is just what you use to make your website look pretty. It's not the structure of it. It's the setting the colors and the borders and the font sizes and things like that. But in a sense, as soon as you start, okay, we need to map something out with Flexbox, you're going off to CSS tricks, which has been bought by DigitalOcean or something. There's a whole story there about, but reference manuals. My whole career in PHP was just regularly looking up the PHP reference manual. You don't need to memorize all the functions when you know how to look them up. We said this last week. you know, like if the skills in knowing how to figure it out. If you know it's manual it is, you can always go look at the reference manual. CSS is the same. So these fundamentals, and we've spoken to this before, that the fundamentals don't change. The real basic ones, like control structures is control structures. CSS has been around for over 20 years or more now, maybe more. It was new once, but like the basics of CSS, the whole underlying points of it being a cascading style sheet and how that cascading works, what selectors are, that hasn't changed in 20 years. You know, so it's really getting a grasp on the basics and the fundamentals. It's the same as what I said when I started Drupal. I was a PHP person. I knew how to code in PHP. I knew how to write neat code, how to put a coding checker on it, that, you know, code version of a spell checker, you know, and run that on it. And they go, this is a great submission. It's like, because I knew the basics.
Yep.
The basics. And I think there's, you hear that in a lot of places. The fundamentals, go back to the fundamentals. Like you're training in martial arts, they always come back to the basics. And I think it absolutely applies in here as well. And we, as an industry, I believe we like to know it all. We like to learn the latest thing. We like to be up in front of it.
But the fundamentals never change.
You've got to get the fundamentals down. Yeah.
That's it. That's it. And I've said this before, that a website has the anatomy of a website is the same. It's a list of objects displayed in any which way form and a bunch of forms. And that's it. Nothing has changed. Just the way you build websites has changed.
Yeah, nothing's changed, but it's all changed.
But just the way you build it. And if you understand the concept and, you know, this whole push now for server-side rendering and this and that, okay, so now you can write back-end code in JavaScript. All right.
Right, yeah.
Every other system has been doing that for the last 20 years. It's nothing new. Oh, you realized that offloading some of the processing to a proper server is actually better than doing everything in the DOM on the client. Okay, good. Now, you know,
now we've got named routes.
I know, named routes,
which is,
you know, we actually stuck to PHP, so now PHP is cool again. Well, probably not, but you know what I mean.
It's not.
Things go back in full circle, and you know, a day doesn't go by where somebody complains that what PHP that's still around. I thought that was dead. It's like,
I literally saw someone this afternoon on Facebook going, "Can someone teach me PHP?" And within a minute, there was someone commenting, "Don't learn PHP, go learn JavaScript." And it's like, the guy wants to learn PHP, let him learn PHP. There's plenty of work. I'm going to...
Well, yeah,
you ever had trouble getting work in... Oh, I've gone out of... Hello. Yeah, like PHP hasn't... We're off topic, but PHP hasn't gone anywhere, and it's not going anywhere. AI will take everybody out before PHP's gone.
AI is going to develop its own language so that humans can't read it and then lock everyone out. Yes. Now here we go.
Learn Drupal quick before AI does.
Well, I think we've got 40 minutes into this episode before we mention AI. Oh, no, I did talk about Copilot. We should have a little counter specifying how many minutes is before we start mentioning AI. Yes.
Just have a Terminator sound in the background.
I'll be back. Just comes in every single time you mention it.
I'll be back.
That's it. We should have one of those, buttons where you press a button and it comes in on the side.
Giving me homework for next week.
There you go. Yes. Be one of those fancy streamers. And yes, we mentioned CSS, but that's the same with JavaScript as well. At the end of the day, learn JavaScript. Yes, there's TypeScript.
Yeah.
That's pretty much the standard these days when it comes to anything other than JavaScript.
I still almost come back. It's the same thing. Either go get a job or have a goal. Because you're going to learn JavaScript, CSS, HTML anyway. That.
Yeah, exactly.
If you're going to develop Drupal, they're fundamental basic skills that you need for any web development in any job. You're not going to get it. I mean, for a long time, I said I didn't know how to code JavaScript. And then one day we were at work and they brought in someone to come and do a JavaScript course. And I spent 8 hours straight sitting there in a JavaScript course going, I knew all that. I think I learned one thing at the end. One of the last things in the last 10 minutes, he told me, I'm like, that's what that is. right? But you know, in a sense, I didn't know I knew it, which is an interesting, you know, from a coding standpoint, though. I've said this before: the fundamentals are the if statements are if statements, loops are loops, arrays are arrays. But generally, there are some minor differences here and there, but the fundamentals
exactly.
are
exactly.
So these are, it's interesting to read this blog and see it coming from this angle, though, when it's going, you know, how do you learn Drupal? And it goes right back to you've already got involved in the Drupal community, and then it's like learn HTML and the DOM, CSS, and JavaScript and PHP. Where if I was going to write a blog on how to learn Drupal, I don't think I would have thought to do that. I would have assumed that you had that down. So
all true, but a lot of people did learn PHP so they can modify Drupal.
Yeah, well, I think the same as WordPress. I was speaking to a friend of mine last night who's, you know, she said, I'm learning how to code widgets to get my shopping cart on WordPress to send a abandoned cart email out. And I was almost like, if you're coming from nothing, I don't want to be. I wouldn't want to be learning code in the middle of something like that, because I learned 20 years ago. I learned PHP. I wouldn't know where to start learning it now. In that sense, go and read the docs.
That's it.
Well, to be honest, let's go back and tell a story about what was my learning curve on some of these basics. Because even when I was at high school, we'd have a thing in the morning called drop everything and read. They call it DEAR. Right? It's basically roll call. And then after they called your roll call, you had half an hour to sit there and read. I mean, back in those days, it was MS-DOS. I had the MS-DOS book, was about that thick, you know, and I'd read that, right? And by the end of the year, I had a full education on you know, and I tell you what, make a mistake, do something wrong, you'll learn damn fast.
Yeah.
Brand new computer that cost the parents $3,000. I deleted the auto exec batch thing. Computer won't turn on. I very quickly learned what the auto exec batch file was and how to write one. Same thing happens at work, right? You go in there, server goes down, you write a bug, you push a bit of code, it makes it break. Boss says, fix it now. You learn damn fast.
Yeah.
That brings me back to the same thing I said, go get a job.
Yeah. Well, that's
the stakes are higher, right?
That's it.
So there is a lot here where we're reading through. It's, you know, HTML, CSS, JavaScript, accessibility. That's something that I think a lot of people just skip over, because it's not something you can get away with not knowing it. Seems like a nice to have, but it's also far more important nowadays than it was a while. You know, before it used to be a thing you should do, but no one did. But now, especially in government sites, it's legally obliged to build accessible website. And I don't know how that when it hits the ground, when you're an organized, you know, when you're a private company. I don't know how well that's enforced. Definitely, accessibility being how to build a website that is accessible for everybody, people with disabilities, people who can't see well, so screen readers can read it, that sort of stuff.
Yes.
Absolutely.
The next ones are, I think, a bit specific to PHP. So we have, learn PHP, which is important. I would assume you'll know a bit of PHP, but not all the time. I knew very little PHP when I started doing Drupal. I knew enough to tinker around, but the fact that Drupal was open source meant I could see how the code was written, and I had a lot of moments where I was like, oh, I didn't know you could do that in code. And I actually learned a lot of concepts about coding in general from Drupal. I don't know if that's a good thing. I don't know if that's a bad thing. I'm not a computer scientist. I didn't study computer science at university, but because of Drupal's open source nature, I looked at the code and I just learned how things work. It's like, okay, so, you know, whenever you're setting up like an if statement, switch, a flow, how to assign variables and things like that, you just learn through playing around with it and dealing with bugs.
It reminds me, it does come back to a very well-known name in the Drupal community. I've heard him give the advice of, you know, I'll ask him, why do you know so much? How do you know so much? Why do you always have the right answers? How do you know how Drupal works so well? And he goes, because I contribute to core.
Exactly.
You know, so that goes back to that very first tip about go get a mentor. It's almost, you know, I've never been so good at it. And that's to say, you know, people are different, right? I know I go to work and you spend the whole 5 days, you're getting these problems thrown at you. It's stressful. You get to the weekend, you go, I've got nothing left in me. But then other people seem to have the time to, on their own, are passionate about it, will then jump on and go and find core issues to go and fix. Good for them. If you've got that skill, and I have contributed to core, don't get me wrong, but sparingly and sparsely and here and there.
Yes. And that's very, very true. You just have to contribute to core if that's what you want to learn. I take my hat off to people who do that. Again, when it comes to contributing, we all contribute in our own ways. And unfortunately for me, I would love to have the time and energy to sit down and do that type of work. But for me, creating content is my thing. Even I find that exhausting, you know. Right?
Well, I've just been through that process. We've spoken a few times in here about my course, which I launched the other couple of days.
Oh, well,
and I've had two
started off that. Congratulations, you got your course out.
Thank you. Finally did it.
So are you going to give a free plug? Come on, give it a free plug.
Mastering Drupal Content Creators Edition.
Right,
so it is aimed at beginners. It's aimed at people who are using Drupal. So if you've got a job, you're a content manager. They've got our website's Drupal. You got to go and put content on it. It's for that. You can find it on Udemy. I guess I'll put a link in the description.
Yeah, put a link.
Thanks for that. What was I speaking to? Content creation.
Yes, content creation.
I've done a lot of, but that's when I launched it and I put the post up on LinkedIn. Got 2 comments coming back. People going, "That's great. What a good way to contribute."
Mm-hmm. There you go.
That does speak directly to that point. Is creating content, going blogs, but particularly the documentation. I've uploaded a bit of documentation. I've got a few credits for documentation on Drupal.org myself. You know, and then I've even got a patch on Manjaro I did when I was playing with DroidCam, the installer for DroidCam. I patched, you know, very one-liner thing that I put up there.
Very good.
You know, but see, it's interesting in that process. I don't know the ecosystem. I haven't applied the patch. It was somebody else's project. I'm just in an issue queue and going, here's the code I changed. And you see that a lot in Drupal sometimes too. You'll actually see an issue and someone goes, they'll paste the code into the comment. Fine. If that's what you know how to do, better to get it up. That's what we said at the start, right? Better to do it wrong than not do it at all.
Yeah.
So if you don't know how to create a patch, put the code up there. It's interesting. The one thing I know, updating documentation, be aware often the documentation's wrong. It's an open source community. Some of that documentation's years old and things have moved, or it's incomplete. Sometimes bugs have been introduced since it was written, so it'll tell you to run something that now doesn't work anymore. Yeah. That's a very common case. I know I've had some people say to me, well, if you're complaining the documentation's wrong, fix the documentation. But I'm like, that's a catch-22 because the documentation's wrong and it doesn't work. I don't know how it's supposed to work. How am I supposed to? I'm trying to learn how it works and use the documentation to learn it. But that's, having said that, there's a lot of times that's not been the case, and I've been able to go and figure out what the issue was and go in and go, right, I know. I don't want the next person behind me to have the same challenge of trying to figure out what that was. So I'm going to go and update the documentation. And same thing. It's amazing, like Drupal's like Wikipedia, Drupal, and so's things like the Ubuntu forums and the docs. If you've got an account, you can edit it. So get involved.
Absolutely.
It really is. I mean, this is like learning a language though, right? You know, the best way to learn a language is go and spend a year in the country where they speak it.
Yes.
Which funny, I keep saying these things that bring me back to my first point about go get a job. It's the same thing, but immerse yourself.
That's it. You just need to get in there and
because you learn by repetition too.
Go through the pain.
You know, what's that thing they teach? What do they call it? There's the software things like Anki software where they do the repeated memory.
Oh yeah.
I can't remember the name of it. Where you get your list of stuff to memorize.
Spatial repetition and all that type of stuff.
Spaced repetition. That's what it's called. Yeah, and I think that's something you can't dabble in this. You gotta get into it. If you go in there and you go, I'm gonna learn Drupal, and you spend a couple of hours and wait 6 months and come back, you're never gonna get anywhere. You've got to jump in Any new tech, you got to jump in and use it. I'm amazed at some people how they manage to pick up so many new technologies and stuff. It's like because of that. I'm like, how, some people tend to have that memory, I guess, where they just do something and they retain it. I need to have that repetition. I need to repeat the, and even still, I won't remember things. And I think that's the same thing we spoke in our episode before about imposter syndrome and the cult of dumb that we went through as well. It's the same. Don't beat yourself up. As I said, like learning PHP, I spent years and years regularly going to the reference manual. And you hear it as a joke, but it's absolutely 100% true. Is often the answer to how do you do such and such is ask the question in Google. And of course, now we can do our sound effect for Arnie because now it's do it. Ask ChatGPT. Right?
Yes, exactly.
But it is, you don't need to know everything. So that, which is why they spend so much time. I imagine this blog actually really well done because the first thing it says is connect with a supportive community. Yeah. That's the very first thing that it says. Bloody good advice, I say.
Well, there you go. There you go. All right. So the next one is, again, specific, but I think it's important. Learn Git. I think that's important. We can all agree on that.
I think these days, any tech at all, I think you need to know Git, even if you're doing documentation. You want to update a README file, you're going to have to do it in Git. I mean, you can do it through GitHub. You can go to GitHub and edit a README file and make a commit through the GUI interface. But even so, I think just understanding Git, because it's going to give you that lingo. Git's a given. If you don't know what Git is, it's a version control system, which like revisions. If you go into Google Docs, for example, when you write Google Docs and it tracks your changes and you can go back and you can revert to previous changes, it's a code automated way of doing that. I won't go into many more details, but it's a way to regularly save your work and be able to revert to previous changes.
Yes,
and share those changes with other people. If you haven't visited GitHub, I mean, a lot of people that aren't even tech people have got to have heard of GitHub in a lot of cases.
Exactly.
So
exactly. Didn't you hear about there was something going around the social medias where somebody was complaining about being told about some program and you need to go to GitHub and compile it yourself. And they were like, I'm not a developer. I don't know what this means.
I have heard that going around. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But one thing just to mention about Git, I did see, I think it was on Hacker News, that they were saying, what is the next? And this also got me thinking as well. Git has won the version control system. Like what is beyond this? Because when you think about it, the success of a version control system is the fact that everyone is using it. It has a network effect.
Git 2.0.
Yeah, I understand that, but what's the next evolution?
Don't ask the question. I think this rarely happens.
What? Where
everyone look at the JavaScript ecosystem.
True. Yes.
Right. I kind of.
There is a huge issue about.
At least Git's open source. GitHub's not open source.
Yeah.
Git is. But it's interesting. It's almost like maybe there should be competition. Like competition's healthy. Too much competition is. That's the interesting. I've seen this same reference about. I read this 20 years ago about Linux. The reason why Apple and Microsoft were so much more popular is because basically the consumers had a choice, Apple or Microsoft. And when they got that, it's like, here's the browser, here's the thing, go. And then you go, what's this Linux thing? And it's going, well, you can have Linux, you can have Ubuntu, you can have Manjaro, you can have KDE desktop, you can have GNOME desktop, and then you can decide where you want to put your buttons. And there's, I just want my computer. Right. And that's, and that's where JavaScript's got a problem. I've not done a lot of work on WordPress. I was interested. Last night I sat down and watched a video because this same friend I was talking to said they were coding, wanted to do an extension for their shopping cart. I'm like, I'm interested in the commerce on WordPress, I go and watch a video I type commerce plugin WordPress, and the first video is my advice of the 4 best commerce plugins for WordPress. And you're like, oh, I'm overwhelmed already, right? Because, coming from Drupal, there's the commerce module.
Yeah.
I don't think there are any others.
No, there isn't.
I think that's it, right? And it just makes the choice real easy. I want commerce on Drupal, go use the commerce module. And then as soon as I looked up, I'm curious what's WordPress got. And it's like, here's my advice for the best 4. If that's your advice for the best 4, how many are there? And I'm straight away overwhelmed. So on one hand, though, is the commerce module's got its issues. And if there was competition, would they fix those issues? But then it's interesting. See, I kind of want to advocate for there should be competition. And on the other hand, I'm so glad there's not, because it makes the choice really easy.
Yeah. And
I've got no issues with Git. I've often said as a developer, remember before we had Git, and right.
And
what
the
in
thing
the
is,
earth
though,
did we do?
Yeah.
Right. That was we got into trouble. You'd spend a whole day working, and at the day make a mistake and accidentally delete all your files. Go.
and this is
amazing,
the problem.
Right?
And this is the problem with software. Software always has this cycle. The first few versions are amazing. After you get a decade into a piece of software, it starts going crap. And this has been mentioned. This has been talked about a lot, where it gets more bloated, more crap in there put in, and then somebody creates a new version of it or a different way of thinking about the piece of software. Everyone jumps onto that one.
Yeah,
it's better until a couple of versions, then it gets bloated again, and it's like this whole cycle. And it's amazing that. Yeah, can we just get to a point where we can say, you know what? I think we're done with new features. This is working. Because you think about it.
The front end does this. I wonder how much of it is about, I guess I'll call it the cool factor, because it happens to happen in front end. I think back end people tend to be less visual, less caring about how good they look, in a sense they're in the back end and in the dungeons, right? Like you think IT crowd, they're down the bottom, no one cares about them, right? But the front end people tend to be, especially nowadays, the designers have become coders.
Yeah,
like designers are writing CSS and stuff, and so it's very visual, it's very out there, you're very noticed, and then so people writing JavaScript and stuff, I'm imagining have that, because then it's like, I've written the best tool. No, I've written the best tool. That's and I wonder if that's really what happens to go on, because it's kind of doesn't happen so much in, particularly you look at Drupal modules, for example. There's doesn't happen very often that it's like, I'm going to outdo your module. It's not unless someone really, really gets annoyed with the contributor that's not putting a feature or something that they'll go and fork it. It's very rare. But then in JavaScript, and it was NPM for a while, and then what was it? Almost 6 months ago, there was all that talk about Bun. Bun's the new thing. Bun's going to kill NPM. Bun. And then I haven't heard of Bun again. Like it was around for a month, and then it's gone. And now there's Vite, but Vite seems to be sticking.
What, Vite or Vite? I thought it's pronounced Vite. Is it?
I don't know. It's VITE. The E on the end jumps the consonant and makes you pronounce the vowel. There's a rule about that in English.
There's many rules in English.
Yeah, that don't always follow.
Yeah.
Generally, if there's an E on the end, it jumps the consonant before it and makes the vowel pronounced.
Oh, it's a French word.
An I becomes an I.
It's a French word.
See?
So it's technically.
So it's French. So it's
Vite.
Vite.
It's actually got, if you go on the Getting Started page, there's an actual little audio where how to pronounce it. Yeah. Vite. There we go.
Do you remember that one about there was the audio going around about how to pronounce Linux?
Linux. That's right. I used to call it Linux.
Hello, this is Linus Torvalds, and I pronounce Linux as Linux.
Or what is it? GIF and GIF. Which way use it? GIF or GIF?
I'm not getting into that argument. I'm too opinionated. Feet, you reckon? I'll accept that. It's French. At least there's a reason for why.
It's French for bundler. What is it? What were those ads in the 90s? Yoplait. It's French for yogurt. Anyway.
Did you know that petit miam is French for yummy, monsieur?
Petit miam. It's French for yum.
Yeah. Well, it's the first time I heard of Vite. And it's in text, so they're writing, and I'm reading it as Vite, and everybody's going,
Yeah,
Vite.
same.
I don't know about this Vite, and it's like I didn't get the invite.
I didn't get the invite, and then people are like, "What is Bevan talking about?" It's like,
Dad
and
jokes.
then
Dad jokes in tech.
Bad jokes in tech. Anyway, we did kind of sidetrack. So yeah, Git, learn it. It's
absolutely.
Yeah,
Git's not going anywhere as far as I know.
Well, you think about it, Homebrew. Oh, sorry, you don't use Mac, but for people who use a Mac, there is a packaging manager called Homebrew or Brew that you can run.
Beer.
Yeah. And that uses Git to distribute. Like, he actually does a Git clone of the packages. And just how many times do you see in a README? Oh, just clone this and compile this and clone that. So yeah, Git is everywhere.
Yeah.
Let's just leave it
done.
Git it's done. Yes.
Get her done.
Oh no, Git's in there. I mean, there's puns galore everywhere.
Git. I mean, even the name's just a joke in the first place, isn't it?
Oh well, at least it's not as bad as GIMP. So which is a great open source photo editing tool. No, Vector. Sorry.
No, it's not Vector.
Isn't it? I thought it was a vector processing.
No, well, that's Inkscape's the vector one.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, sorry. GIMP.
It's like Photoshop.
A GNU image manipulation program. Sorry, Inkscape. Yes, that's right. Inkscape's the vector one.
It's like Photoshop with all the buttons in different spots.
Yes. And Inkscape is like Illustrator.
Yes.
Inkscape isn't bad, actually. I used it back in my Ubuntu days.
It's funny in open source. Look at Blender. Like when it comes to 3D modeling, Blender's like the thing.
Yeah.
The open source tool is the thing. I've never touched it.
Yeah.
But it's
anyway,
funny.
We're going sidetracked. Maybe that's maybe that is a there we go. We can add this to a list for next IDs. Open source programs that we recommend. There we go. Add that to the list.
Open source. Got to tell people what open source is first. Fair shake of the source bottle. Humans going.
There you go. Yes. Yeah, that's it. That's it. Open source just means you can look at the code base and it is generally available for free, but not all the time. Free as in beer. I always love that term. I never quite understood that. It took me
a while to get it.
Years to understand. Well,
open source is free as in available, not free as in beer.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Yeah, it was that one. Free as in available, not free as beer. I remember on one of the Drupal podcasts, I used to talk about that. Yeah.
It's I mean, you can sell it. You absolutely can sell. You're quite welcome to sell an open source piece of software, but no one's obliged to. Like, you got to give them access to the code, whether they pay for it or not.
Absolutely.
And then they can compile it themselves and do what they like. No one owns it, but you're quite free to chuck your own label on it and sell it if you like. It's hard to explain open source, isn't it? How do you explain to people that it's software that nobody owns?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. All right, let's quickly move on and smash through this. So we have again the next bunch are Drupal specific. So we try and keep these as generic as possible, but there's going to be some Drupalisms here. Things like setting up a local server.
Are they Drupal specific?
Well, okay, server infrastructure. Yes, if you're going to host the technology somewhere, figure out how to do that, and that's an important part.
Yeah, I literally saw somebody on Facebook land, in Facebook land again, people asking for help. Somebody asked this afternoon is, how do I get my website on Google so that people can access it? It's like, wow, I don't know how to answer that question. Like, because when you're talking about hosting, someone's answer was, do you mean you want to host it? And they're like, yeah. And it's like, but when you're asking the question, like, how do I get it on Google so that people can access it? It's like, I think you might want to go learn the basics first.
Yeah, absolutely.
But setting up local development environments. I mean, this is I wonder this when I set up things. Of course, you go often look at Next.js, for example. Let's go install Node. And same with Python. Python, you got to learn all about virtual Python environments. And there's the same thing where there's choices. You go and Google it, and it gone, there's this environment and there's this one. And how do you know which one to use? And how do you know what the community? Because it generally, there's so many pseudo standards in software. You know, there's 3 different competing technologies, but one of them's used by 80% of people, but it's not officially documented anywhere that's what 80%, because it's not officially, it's not an official standard. It's just what everybody uses.
Yeah.
And that's why you got to get involved with the community on all of these things, right? Because you need someone to tell you. You got to set up in web. And just going on the random blog pages, what happens on random blog forums if you've got same thing happens in music with tablature. You got new people who are learning and they want to contribute and they want to look like they know the answers. So you go, how do I do such and such? And they go, use this development environment. And it might not be what the experts are using.
Yeah.
You can't trust what you're reading on the internet. The same does happen with tablature in guitar. You go and read a tablature and it's wrong. I've heard stories about this, about people they're trying to learn how to do tablature and how to transcribe. So they transcribe it and they put it up even though it's wrong. And then everybody copies it. And now you got the wrong thing everywhere. And same thing happens in software. So get involved with the community because you'll get connected with the people that know.
Yes.
Don't ask on Facebook.
I love that. Don't ask on Facebook. There you go. There's a code and character top tip right there. Don't ask on Facebook.
I think it's a good one. Get a job.
Get a job.
Get a job. Don't ask Facebook.
Yeah.
Stop giggling.
Oh.
Serious.
Yeah. And the other thing is set up a local development environment. That's good. I like that.
Yep.
Again, depending on what type of tech you're learning, a lot of this stuff can be done in the browser.
See, it depends. It's you got to understand the ecosystem.
Yes, and that's one thing I always like to do is avoid using some type of where it does everything in the browser for you and set it up locally, because you learn a lot just by pulling things down, doing npm install, seeing what works, seeing what doesn't work.
Yeah.
And integrating that yourself.
There's also the point of when those one-click wonder tools don't work, well, what do you do?
Exactly.
I had that exact experience the other day. DrupalPod. They just use DrupalPod, and you go DrupalPod, and you go, all right, install this with that patch, and it's a little GUI thing, and you go, just install it, and it goes all these composer errors. You're like, well, I can't get in there and fix that. So it's like I ended up doing it on my local machine, and there's something to be said about just and it's really pull it, bring it down locally and pull it apart, break it.
Yes, totally. And that's why I don't like too much abstraction as well, because when things break, you're thinking to yourself, well, what do I do now? What do I do now?
You get a lot of that in a lot of projects.
Yes.
It wasn't Next.js itself. I think it was the Drupal Next.js integration project. I can't remember what that was. When I was kind of learning, I wanted to set up a headless Drupal. I was playing with that. That was my learning. I'm going to learn how to do headless Drupal. And I go to the quick start notes, and the first part was install the module. And cool, install the module. And it goes, go to the configuration page and select such and such in the drop down. So you go to the configuration page and you hit the drop down, and it throws a big Ajax error. Right, step 2. And that's in that case, I learned a lot and ended up submitting a patch to fix the error. Right, this is I'm on step 2 of the quick start, and I'm submitting a patch to fix an error. That's just part of the expect things to go wrong, especially in the open source world. But even this is even speaking to that one hit wonder thing, even in the proprietary closed source world, if your software doesn't work, what do you do? At least in open source, when it doesn't work, you can get in and fix it if you've got the skills.
Well, that's it.
And it also tends to, that's what I said, the documentation's often wrong, right?
Yeah. No, absolutely. Absolutely.
So these bits at the end, we might as well get on with it.
Yes, let's just smash
these bits at the end. Funnier, they start referring to the bits I was saying I think you should do first. But I'll let you ride through that if you like.
Yeah, and that is Drupal user guide. Well, just getting familiar with Drupal, installing it. doing a bit of site building, having a play with it. But this comes down to just having an environment which you can set up locally and just being able to break things. That's important. And then also there's recommendation of Symfony components. Yeah, I mean, I think it's good to get an understanding of when something is a Symfony component and you want to learn more about it, go learn about it. But I don't think learning Symfony first and then coming to Drupal will help you understand Drupal, because the Symfony components are really just a small part of it. I may be wrong, but Twig is a Symfony component. The controllers and things like that are Symfony components.
Yeah, the routing systems or
routing
Symfony.
System. But again, there's enough information out there to just Google it and saying Drupal route, how do I get the node I'm on or something, and you'll find it. Yeah, you'll find all that stuff.
You know what's not on here from a Drupal perspective, Ivan? What's glaringly missing from a Drupal standpoint is Drush.
Yeah,
100%. If because we're trying to keep this a bit open about learning any system, but as a Drupal, I'm going through this and I go, Drush is missing. You want to be? Yeah. Is it not referenced at all?
No, the word Drush is not referenced at all.
Well, that's an omission. You want to be learning Drush. Of course, what made me think of it, because when you're talking about how to learn Drush Generate with all its template, you can go and once you understand what a controller is, you go Drush Generate controller. So it can generate all sorts of base plate code for you, with really good, it then have really good comments about why things are done and what you need to do as well. It can get you 90% of the way there. There's something to be said for writing it for yourself from scratch too. I advocate for almost a combination of that. Go and generate the code in Drush so you can see what it does, and then go and write it yourself.
Yeah,
use it documentation. But you want to be using Drush. You don't want to be having to go into the GUI all the time to clear your cache every 5 minutes.
No, of course not.
No.
Get
a handle on there's the list of little commands you want to know, like Drush ULI you use so often. Login, to generate a one-time login URL you can copy and paste in. Drush is if you're developing a Drupal and you're not learning Drush, you're hamstringing yourself. So,
well, that's it. That is it.
Go learn Drush. Get a job.
Yes, get a job.
What's the other?
The other ones, Drupal themes, learn how to theme a Drupal site, which in this day and age, it really depends how you're using Drupal. If it's a headless Drupal, maybe not. The theme system in Drupal is a bit, is it a little old fashioned?
Well, this is the thing.
Think about it, because
in my Drupal career, I've never done a headless Drupal, though I've worked on projects that should have been headless Drupal.
Yeah.
But if you're learning Drupal from scratch now, I'm wondering how much value is in it. There's a lot of Drupal jobs where you've got to learn it on the job anyway, right? If you need to.
Yeah.
I almost go, unless you're really interested in doing front-endy stuff, I wouldn't prioritize learning the theme. That would be my advice. Don't prioritize it. If you need to know it, you'll learn it on the job. Otherwise, headless tends to be. I mean, if I was building, mind you, I didn't. Though I've just whipped up my own website and I just downloaded a theme and installed it. I didn't make it go headless because I'd have to learn all how to do the headless stuff. Yeah. So it depends on if you're building my own little project at home, it's different. But if I was building a project for a big paying, big corporate client, and I was there at the beginning when they're going, how we're going to architect that. Most projects I'd be advocating strongly for put a headless front end on it, which begs the whole question, where does Drupal fit in that scenario? And then Drupal's going to be picked for very specialists. We've spoken of this before, how Drupal's just its content management ability. It's less of a theming website development tool and more of a content hub.
Yeah, exactly. It's like a fancy FileMaker Pro.
We've spoken of that before.
Yeah. Microsoft Access, a fancier Microsoft Access. That's the way I see it now.
Yeah.
And there is value in that. It gives you awesome revisions, content workflow, user accounts, and it doesn't lock you down and say, well, the free community version only allows 3 different roles.
Yeah.
And then it charges $20 a seat. That's why governments use it. That's why I've used it in state and federal
very
government
stable.
Yeah.
Very, very configurable.
Do whatever you want with it. Some people take that to the extreme of using Drupal for many things. But yeah, that's the way I see it.
I mean, I do that. Drupal's my hammer. Every nail.
Every nail requires Drupal. That's it. It's like, we need to build this. What about Drupal? We need to build this. What about Drupal? We need to build this. Hey, I have a list of videos I want to do on how to use Drupal to build a course website, how to use Drupal to build a Netflix, how to use Drupal to build a Twitter, how to use Drupal to build all these little things, which will be a fun experience. I wouldn't recommend it, but it can be done.
Yeah, I mean, as soon as you go, how to use Drupal to build a course, I'm like, use Moodle. That's the one use case. Everything else, use Drupal. You're going to build a course, Moodle. Of course, I've worked with Moodle before, right? That's the reasoning on that. Whereas Drupal's a content management system, Moodle's a learning management system. So as Drupal's designed to deliver generic content like blog posts, articles, pages, little Moodle's for delivering courses, training materials. It's very specialist. So there you go. Now you know what an LMS is versus a CMS.
Yeah,
you learned something here today.
It's a learning management system. If you're learning new tech, have a goal, have a plan. Yeah. You are not an imposter.
But I spoke about this before. It's got here the doing bit, the path, get real world experience, choose a side project. I'm not sure about that. Partner with an agency or freelancer, contribute to Drupal. We said that, and then it is get that job. I'm like, it's too late if you come there. I mean, if you don't know HTML and CSS and stuff, maybe you should go and learn those basics. But like, if you're already a web developer and you just want to pick up and learn Drupal, then go get a job in it.
Yeah.
Now, like right now.
Absolutely.
That's my advice. There's a reel going around that I saved off where a girl's going, the power of rejection. And she goes, I just heard that if you want something, just go and try and get rejected. So she applied for this job as like a CEO or something. And
I decided I would try to get rejected as many times as possible. So I applied to Harvard as a joke. I ended up getting waitlisted. And then I realized that maybe if you apply for the things you want to do, or if you apply for crazy opportunities, you actually will get accepted. So then I decided to be delusional and apply for a job at a marketing agency without a college degree. And the job mandated you had a college degree and multiple years of experience outside of college. This was over a year ago, and at the time I was 18, and they offered me the job at $40,000 at the age of 18, and I outranked the 50-year-olds that were applying for this job. So then I realized, if you want to do something, apply.
Like that kind of, like that's the date. So, I mean, I kind of did that. I wasn't very up on Drupal when I applied for the job and I got it. That there really is something to be said for that. So that's where you're not an imposter, right? Join a community of Drupalers for encouragement, advice.
Well, that's it.
And that's the same with all the open source tools. Go and join because Drupal's the second biggest open source project behind Linux. I mean, WordPress has got to be up, but I'm sure I've heard that as a stat. It must be.
You do know if you leave that, if you put that out in the world, people will correct you on that. I don't know. Like when you say biggest. How we quantify that?
I don't know. I'm just going as something I've heard. I'm putting it out there.
Something I heard.
Correct me if I'm wrong.
This is where, oh man, we're going to wake up the next day after this video's out, and hey, we're going to get reaction videos about this, about us doing a reaction video to the tutorial and blog post. Anyway, maybe the amount of contributors. I think I've heard something similar, like the amount of contributors or something.
Yeah, someone will know. Someone tell us. And start putting comments in YouTube.
Drupal, the biggest.
There's a few of you, you know who you are, that keep sending us wonderful, lovely comments in Slack. Put it on YouTube, so other people, because otherwise you're just in the in that insular bucket, right? With the same people that we're spoken to that we know. Get it out in the world. Get it out in the world.
Well, on the About Us page, it says the Drupal community is one of the largest open source communities in the world.
One of.
Oh,
it's got smaller.
We are more than 1 million passionate developers, designers, trainers, strategists, coordinators, editors, and sponsors working together. Okay, I don't know. One of the biggest. See,
Drupal community is one of the largest open source communities.
One of the largest. There you go. You never ever want to be specific on the internet, because that way You have to be ambiguous. That's it. I do love it. I just Googled, is Drupal the biggest? And then, in Reddit, is Drupal still relevant to learn in 2023? Do I want to click on that?
Yes. Drupal's the biggest. Mate,
yes, one of the biggest. No. You're being too specific again. One of the biggest. It's all about language. You know that I do. That actual little bit's going to just be taken out of context, and then you're going to be everywhere. Where it's like Evan says, it's the second largest. Check out our other videos. Speaking about other videos, other podcasts, we do have a podcast about imposter syndrome. So if you want to get our thoughts and opinions about that, check out our channel. And as Bevan mentioned, please leave a comment, give us your reviews, subscribe, your tips and some ideas. And also if you have other topics you want us to cover, please just chuck in a comment. If it's a good idea, we'll accommodate it.
Remind me next week, we'll mention the comments at the start.
All right. No comments from last week. Well, that's it. Yes. So if you want a free plug, just chuck it in.
Yeah, we'll plug you.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay.
Cool.
I hate Drupal 69 says.
There you go. It says they hate Drupal. Okay, good. There we go. All right. Well, with that, we'll see you all later. All right. Bye-bye.